So today we're going to do a short video on the cleaning of the semi-automatic handgun. When you go to clean your semi-automatic handgun, you're going to need certain supplies. They will include bore solvent, gun oil, Q-tips, which are going to be your best friend when cleaning the gun, some type of rag, eye protection, some type of nitrile gloves for protecting your hands, the bore patches, get the rod with the jag or needle nose tip to it, and a bore brush. The bore brush is caliber specific. This is my 9mm Glock 34, so you will need a caliber specific bore brush for your firearm. First step to any cleaning of your handgun, we'll start with unloading the gun. Following on the heels of one of my earlier videos, remove the magazine first, cycle out any cartridges from the chamber, then check that chamber to make sure that it is unloaded. Next, you'll need to disassemble your semi-automatic handgun. With my Glock, that's done by verifying the chamber is empty and removing tension from the striker by pressing the trigger, pulling back on the slide, drop down the slide stop, the frame comes and it separates from the slide. Guide rod and recoil spring will come out by just simply lifting up and pulling it up and out. Barrel lifts up and out, and we have now disassembled the firearm. Most people will start by cleaning the inside of the barrel. It is often very filthy. Start with the harshest thing first, which is your bore brush. As you run that down through the barrel, you're going to knock out big chunks of burnt on gunpowder. Do a number of passes through that, fully through the inside of the barrel, and then you're finished with your bore brush. Most people then will start with the cleaning of the, will continue the cleaning of the barrel with patches and solvent, which is the step down from the metal scraping the inside of your barrel to your solvent. Get it wet with a little bit of your bore solvent, and then begin the scrubbing process there. Fully through, don't be afraid to do back and forth motions, cleaning out the inside of the barrel from front end to back end. And then dispose of the dirty patch. Anytime you wet patch, whether it be wet with solvent or wet with gun oil, you'll follow it up with a dry patch. So having done a wet patch, I will now run a dry patch through there to pick up any of the gun oil that's left. Inspect your patch to just see how dirty it is. If it comes out perfectly clean, then you're largely done, but you probably won't get that through your first cleaning with the solvent. You may have to run the solvent patches down through there a number of times, 5, 6 or more, followed with a dry pad each time. That's wet patching, dry patching, wet patching, dry patching. But then you're moving on to gun oil. So dampen the patch with gun oil and then run it through the barrel. You can do your scrubbing motions with it as well. Dispose of the soiled patch and follow up this wet patch with a dry patch. Once again, when that dry patch runs through, you'll inspect it to see how filthy it is. Once that comes out clean to your satisfaction, you're finished with the inside of the barrel. You also will need to clean the outside of the barrel. Don't be afraid to use some solvent on the outside of the barrel, scrubbing down the outside. You will have lots of little nooks and crannies. You have this tower structure here, part of the locking lugs, and there's always a recess in there that needs to be cleaned out. You have the breech face and the ramp here that needs to be paid attention to. All the little corners that are inside of it. Wipe off that solvent. You'll want to pay close attention to the front end of the barrel, known as the muzzle, where the crown is. This is one of the places you're going to inspect for damage. On the barrel, you have the inside of the barrel comes to the forefront, the muzzle, and then there's a short angular cut before it turns the final cut angle to 90 degrees to the inside of the barrel. That is the crown. So here's the front 90-degree angle. Here's 90 degrees outside, 90 degrees inside, but just right around the inside edge here is a small area, about maybe a 32nd or 16th of an inch or so, that is cut at about a 30 degree angle. That is the crown. You can literally place your finger on that and rotate the barrel, and you'll feel if there's any nicks, gouges, cuts inside of there. Check that for damage. If that's become damaged, your shots may be inaccurate, and you'll need to replace the barrel or have it recut. Also, inspect the locking lug tower structure right here for signs of stress. This is under stress with every shot. I have seen at least one barrel fail in which the slide then came directly off the top of the gun during a match when this locking lug sheared off right across this point here. So inspect that for signs of stress or damage. If you see that, it would be time to replace that barrel. After cleaning the inside and outside of the barrel and inspecting it for damage, you are finished. After all that time spent cleaning the barrel, it might be nice to take a short break. Clean your guide rod and recoil spring. Mine is not the factory guide rod recoil spring which is captured. It's actually an independent piece. I just wrap a patch around it and then turn the spring like a turn screw, wiping down the entire length of your recoil spring. This does not get exceptionally dirty. Remember, we have probably 3 to 4 feet of metal right here, and so seeing this little bit of dirt and filth that comes off that spring doesn't indicate actually that it has been very dirty. We've just picked up a lot of covered a lot of space across the area of the spring as we wipe that down. Guide rod can also just be wiped down. Pay a little attention to the nooks and corners right here, and you're finished with your guide rod and recoil spring. Inspect that guide rod or recoil spring for damage. The coils should be uniform. They should not be stretched out or tighter in appearance, nor should they be bent or kinked. Next comes the slide. Using a patch with a little bit of solvent, I will get down inside and outside of the slide, wiping off all the gunpowder residue that gets around the front of the gun heavily. Right up here near the front sight, help clean up that fiber optic front sight, make it nice and bright again. Get down into the grasping grooves at the rear of the sight. Then start the inside. Right along the breech face where your firing pin is going to be pretty dirty. Avoid getting any excessive liquids down inside that chamber where your striker is located at. You don't want that to get clogged up either with liquids or the accumulation of material because of the presence of liquids in there. Very quickly though, you're going to find that your fingers just don't cut it anymore, and you're off to needing your Q-tips. This is where Q-tips come into their own when cleaning your slide. Dampen the Q-tip with your solvent and get into the recesses that are on the underside of the slide. Any place the Q-tip will reach easily, I clean. If the Q-tip begins to fray, or if I can't stick the Q-tip in there easily, I don't clean there. I don't want to leave cotton behind, nor do I want to break anything that I can't see because that area, that hole, is too small. You can use the Q-tip to get into these small areas. You'll go through a number of them. It allows you to get into the front areas of the slide, underneath where the front sight is, into the area where the recoil spring sits. But more importantly, this Q-tip is going to allow me to get into the grooves of the slide that match up with the rail. So this groove runs the entire length of the slide, and it is typically very dirty. You can see that I picked up some off of that particular side. I will also use the Q-tip as a drying method for getting into that same small area that I've just cleaned to pick up the solvent that I've left behind from using a wet Q-tip. And then use your rag to wipe off any excessive solvent. Some people will use their gun oils for this as well. There's one important part of your slide that needs to be inspected. This is the time to do it. If you look here on your left-hand side underneath the slide, you will see this small hook shape that I'm placing this small screwdriver underneath. That is the extractor. It pulls the cartridge or the brass out of the barrel, and that needs to be inspected for damage. It's under stress. It's a little hook shape like that. If this fatigues and fails and becomes a straight piece of metal, we'll no longer grasp the cartridge and pull it out of the chamber or the brass. You also want to clean underneath that. Having a little help at this moment in time is beneficial, as in getting underneath that requires a certain amount of dexterity. If somebody were pressing on the top of the slide, this would allow me to kind of get underneath the extractor and floss it really well. It does get quite dirty underneath there. I'm uncertain that you can get so much buildup that the extractor no longer works, but I wouldn't want to test that theory and have the gun fail at an inopportune moment. So now we're done with our slide, and we're headed off to finish up with our frame. Go ahead and use your rag initially to wipe down the inside of the mag well. Cover as much area as you can. Go down through the top as well to clean as much of the mag well as you can. Be careful of your ejector. It is sharp, and if you go ahead and poke that down on top of your finger, you'll find out that it will break the skin. Wipe into the larger areas and recesses, but once again, your Q-tips will become your best friend. Use the Q-tip and a wee bit of solvent to get into some of these smaller recesses. With the Q-tip frays, chuck it quickly, get a fresh one. Again, if I can reach it with the Q-tip, I will clean it with the Q-tip. That includes some of these smaller areas, but I will not leave cotton behind, nor will I force that Q-tip down inside of there. That Q-tip allows us to get to a lot of these smaller areas. Don't neglect the area underneath the rail here. The slide stop, which is pushed up by the empty magazine, is here. On the Glock it will lift up. You can get underneath there with a rag and begin a floss. And now we have cleaned your semi-automatic pistol. The exact methodology is going to vary from firearm to firearm. Now it's time to oil it lightly and reassemble it. For my Glock 34, I will clean the put lubrication on the outside of the barrel. Do not leave oil or liquids on the inside of the barrel. The outside, though, experiences friction as it moves back and forth inside of the slide, and I like to see a little bit of lubrication at that point. Guide rod and recoil spring go back together. I don't put lubrication on mine. Be careful when you're putting back on any spring that works with an actual guide rod. It will give you far more grief than the captured pieces. And that's now back together. We need a little bit of lubrication on a few points on this particular Glock. Always consult your owner's manual, follow their instructions over anything you see in one of my videos. But I put touches of oil on the rails. 1, 2, 3, and 4, one on top of the ejector, and then along this area in the center of the firearm where the locking lugs on the barrel fit in. You should inspect that ejector and make sure that it is of proper shape and has not become sheared or broken off. It is underneath stress on each one of your shots. Then the slide goes back on, all the way back, let go, and if it stays on, it's time to start your function check, which is another video.